So the title of this session is Integrated Tools and Approaches for Making Community-Based EAFM or Ecosystem Approach to Fisheries Management implementation more sustainable, inclusive, and equitable. So basically we'll be having three, I don't think three inputs followed by facilitated discussion, including we have some respondents here with us. So the three presentations will be one from myself on illegal fishing, the second one from Dawn on environmental stewardship, and the third one on gender. Where is that? Gender inclusive approach to EAFM from Joanne and Fredo, no? Or is it just Fredo? Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'll get started. All right. So, okay. Basically, what I'd like to share is about this this effort on illegal fishing in the Philippines, and what we're trying to do about it, So next, where's my next? There. All right, there. So illegal fishing is among the top issues in Philippine capture fisheries, It exacerbates overfishing, worsens inequity. Enforcement is expensive and thus difficult to sustain, The widespread illegality of practices may also decrease motivation to cooperate among the stakeholders, or it could also be used as a motivation to cooperate. So that's a key part. The scale in the Philippines is there was a expert consensus that approximately 27 to 40% of Philippine capture fisheries was captured illegally, So it's really a big issue, commonly cited problem often in the Philippines, in the fisheries, So oops. Now why did we get into this trying to come up with this what we call the IFIT tool, or it's a IUU Fishing Index and Threat Assessment Tool? Well, basically, a lot of the measures that we have to measure how big a problem is illegal fishing, IUU fishing in the Philippines, a lot of it is mainly about number of patrols, number of apprehensions, cases filed, but you don't really get the sense of how big an effect does it really have, in terms of tons, in terms of catch, in terms of effects on people and so on, the compliance is not even clear. What percent of people are complying? Other measures that we have, such as night light based detection, satellite based, and anonymous reporting, only provide a partial view. There's a global tool to try to rank the countries in terms of IUU, but for us it's a bit too coarse to really translate into actionable things at the local government and fishery management area levels, where we do a lot of the key interventions. So it's more for an inter-country approach that the global tool has. So we're trying to, but still using that same frame that the global tool had. The global tool had three pillars. Prevalence, how big of a threat is IUU fishing? Vulnerability, what are the factors causing IUU to continue? The attracting factors for IUU, and response. What's being done, sort of the repelling factors for IUU. So we try to use this, pick up from the global that framework, and then we try to develop sub indicators that were of relevance to our context, the scale of municipal to city, or what we call local government units, that are in charge of a lot of the coastal area, and then we're trying to develop it for the larger areas which the national government is in charge of. Basically, the tool is trying to assess the risk using these details to then plan targeted solutions, and then use the tool again to track the progress of change through time. We've in partnership first piloted three of these sites in blue, and then in partnership with the national government and a lot of 700 plus partners all throughout the country, tested it and scaled it up to 160 municipal and city governments throughout the country, no? As shown here in the map. So basically, the structure of this presentation is we'll discuss the prevalence, vulnerability, and response. Just top level summaries of these things in the 160 LGUs where we did this, and then if you'll see this FMAs. This was how the fishing areas of the country were cut up, and this is generally of national government managed. No, the municipal areas, this 160 LGUs, they usually manage the 15 kilometers from shore, so it's much shorter, smaller area. And this is 160 out of 917 local government units throughout the country that are coastal. Then the 12 FMAs, we were able to test the tool at the FMA scale for one of the FMAs. Then we'll speak a little bit about how do we deal then with distant water fishing happening in our country, and how do we try to make sense of the measure the IUU fishing of that, no? So basically, as I said, this was the structure, prevalence, vulnerability, response, and there are 10 indicators or sub-indicators in prevalence, and we'll get into one of them just to show an example. So one of the examples is here, the number of apprehended violators divided by total number of patrols. How often, when you go out patrolling, how often do you see violators, basically? And this is the number of local governments out of 160 here, 31, 21, 26, and 57. So the most of them, basically, greater than 25% of the time, every time they go out to patrol, they find somebody violating, the fisheries laws. So basically, that's how this rating system works. So, and we have the 10 indicators. I'm not definitely going to go into 10, but just to show you how that works. And then for each rating, we also try to get a sense of, okay, so what is this? What is your scoring based upon? It's various participants from each municipality coming together and scoring together. But then their impression and their score is based on what? Do you have like systematic records, or just based upon your gut feel impressions, or what? So that's data quality score. So for each of the indicators, we have the rating and the data quality score. So next, this is another one of the 10 indicators. Basically, have illegal fishing incidences been increasing, decreasing, or about the same, or some types going up, some types going down. So again, these are some of the results from that 160 LGUs. No, so those are the more structured indicators that we have. But the IFIT, when we go into it with the communities and the local governments in each LGU, we also try to quantify each type of illegal fishing. What are the different types and what's the volume, so that we can get a sense of which ones are the ones that have higher impact on our fisheries. No, so in this case, you'll see here this type of fishing gear, the lintigan, that type of illegal activity has the biggest effect. Whereas sometimes, anyway, I'll explain. And then this other table here also says, okay, who are the perpetrators of these illegal fishing activities? It says, the ones of, let's say, how this table is read. For example, the ones from Busuanga, they illegally fish in Linapakan around 1 metric ton per year. So that's whereas maybe the ones from Culion, they illegally fish in Linapakan maybe 2 metric tons per year. So that's so we also get a sense of who's doing the illegal fishing and where are they from and where are they doing the illegal fishing, so that we can better understand how do we approach the problem. No? This is a summary, like I said, we did 160 LGU. So this is just a summary here of where the volumes are higher than the others according to the estimates. from the different exercises we did. What are the different types of illegal fishing activities? So you'll have here the different codes and types. No, so which one? Different areas, of course, would tend to have different types of illegal fishing in their area. No, per area it's a different kind. No, so that's just to show you what we did with the prevalence. Of course, there's a lot more detail, but the next we'd like to get into here is, let's say, vulnerability. What is attracting these illegal fishing activities? So one of the things we did when we tried to do analysis and correlations among these ratings was that illegal fishing tends to be increasing in those areas where there's poor registration and licensing of fishing activities. No, so yeah, and the commercial fishing intrusion tends to be more commonly reported in areas that have complex physical configuration of many islands. So it's harder to spot them where they are from afar. Basically, in the Philippines, the commercial fishing is not allowed near shore. Basically, that's reserved for the small-scale fishers, and the commercial fishing are the larger-scale fishers. They're not allowed within 15 kilometers from shore. No, so whereas in areas that are harder to monitor or sight from the shore, that's where they're more commonly reported, and where rough weather and ocean conditions make seaborne patrols more difficult. No? Top perceived causes, we also did like a root cause analysis with many of the sites, and basically the common causes is poverty and adequate sources of income. So they have to rely on fishing, and if the catches aren't very good, due to, let's say, lower and lower catches, then they have to innovate all sorts of ways, and some of which become destructive and illegal then. Of course, weak enforcement and lack of information or understanding of what the regulations are coming up as top perceived causes. No? Whereas for response, some here we have rating systems, and they would again rate based upon checklist where they are, and these are the results that we get. No, and basically we try to pull them all together, come up with indexes and scores, and so we can show the responses. They're trying to address some different responses from the local governments. No, basically we come up with indexes from all of these indicators, and have some sense of where the risk is highest. So that we can try to, the national government can try to calibrate and put additional effort to help those local governments where, it might be more difficult for them because of various circumstances. So basically, that's one way. We also tried to do, here, you can see the different local governments here, but when you pull it together, that's Fisheries Management Area 8, and we tried to also do an assessment at the sort of for these commercial fishing areas, which are these areas here beyond the municipal scale. And we tried to compare, okay, what does it say in terms of illegal activities from along the coast, which are these, which we discussed just a while ago, and which illegal fishing activities are done by the commercial bigger scale fishing, which would happen in these areas, including these spaces in between. No? These are the volumes and so on, and we try to rate them. Some of the vulnerability factors, some of the response factors that were being shared by the BFAR, the Bureau of Fisheries, that are trying to do these assessments. And finally, for illegal fishing from distant waters, one of our colleagues looked at the VEERS and looked at the illegal, the number of fishers using lights coming in, and we can see that a lot of them seem to be non-Filipino registered fishing boats. And in the Philippines, there are no licenses given for foreign fishing to fish within our waters generally. No. So yes, these are the numbers that we're seeing, which don't appear to be well. This is total, but then we feel that quite a lot of them probably aren't Filipino fishing boats, just based on the numbers that we have of our own fishing fleet. And so there's various implications. Basically, the various implications is by having this more tool diving into trying to get the details about illegal fishing, we can develop more targeted responses. It also highlights that we need to do better registration and licensing all across, because that seems to be one of the biggest types of illegal activity, basically, is unregistered, unlicensed fishing boats. No, and yes, the national government will have to assist, because definitely illegal fishing is not evenly done all across the entire country, and some local governments might need more assistance to get this solved. And basically, yeah, the national government and a growing large number of stakeholders throughout the country are wanting to do this more, so that we can more systematically assess, reduce, monitor, and communicate what's going on with our IUU fishing. While IUU fishing is reported to be decreasing in the majority of local governments, there's still quite a lot to be done. And but with this tool, you can see where things are being more effective and where things are being less effective. So we can use this to try to get the good lessons from the areas that are less effective, to bring those lessons to the areas where maybe they're not being as effective. So that's it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I see Elin is still not here.
I've been working with her to try to get her to sign on, and she even tried on her phone, and it doesn't seem to be working.
Okay.
So I think I will maybe move ahead with my
yes. All
talk
right.
at this point.
All right. So let's
Thank you, Andre.
Dawn's presentation. Thank you.
Somehow. Okay. Okay. And I'm going to discuss a different kind of tool, looking at the influences on environmental stewardship in fishing communities, and the considerations for with respect to compliance and fisheries management. So traditionally, in addressing non-compliance in fisheries, there's controls put on inputs and outputs. They really haven't deterred illegal fishing, and enforcement challenges remain because of higher levels of non-compliance, regardless of the inputs and outputs that are put on the system. And in addition, all residents of fishing communities really are directly affected by fisheries regulations, but they're often overlooked in assessments of just compliance related to fisheries management. So we collectively, as part of the Fish Right program, started thinking about how could we build fisheries ecosystem stewardship? So recognizing that all residents in these places are really directly tied to these ecosystems. And the idea of stewardship is that there's really a moral obligation, in addition to just a piece of compliance in terms of complying with the rules, that you have a sense of doing these things because it is the right thing to do. So we started with a typical compliance model that looks at deterrence and perceived illegal gains, including things like enforcement and livelihoods and poverty, and expanded over to include moral obligation. So we're looking at leadership and social influence through legitimacy of both the governance system and also the process and the outcomes, and then moral development and personal values. So how much are people connected to these resources, and how much do they know about them? This tool was piloted in these 3 sites in the Colombianas Islands group, the Science Sea and South Negros, which are part of the Fish Right program funded by USAID. And we collected some overall demographics about we used a survey, a household survey, to test this at this conceptual model. And this is just an overview of some of the overall demographics. And it was relatively evenly split between sites, also between gender. In terms of civil status, the most heavily represented proportion were couples married or living with their significant others. In terms of the ages, the mean age was about 38 years old. Years of education was about 8 years. The household size was about 5.5 people, and the children in the household were just over 2. So these equate pretty closely with the Philippines overall. So we can assume that there is some sort of representation of the country provided by these survey responses. This is some more information about the demographics by site. There were significant differences between those sites on most of the assessed demographics. So for the purposes of a lot of this research, we analyze them separately, but we also use to think about how we can move the tool forward, we used an assessment of the responses to the tool as a whole. So the way we started to test this was that we identified variables that could be used to create a fisheries ecosystem stewardship index, and that's the top dark gray box here. And then we identified variables for livelihoods and poverty, awareness, and then support for fisheries and regulations on fisheries. In terms of creating the index, it was a simple summation of the actions that could be taken by all fishing community residents, not just fishers. And we used actions as opposed to perceptions to get a more accurate response on what people remembered, as opposed to just perceptions. And then these actions represent connecting directly with different components of the system. So the natural ecosystem, fishing regulations, fishermen themselves, and finally, fisheries managers. This is a graph of the scores for the Fisheries Ecosystem Stewardship Index, or FESI for short, for all of the responses, and differing by site. So the light blue is for Calamayanes Islands region, the orange is Southern Negros, South Negros, and then the green is Visayan Seas. And you can see that the trend for the different sites really differs overall. For Calamayanes Islands group, it starts high and goes low. And for the other two, they are more normally distributed. In addition, the means for Calamayanes Islands is low. For South Negros, it's low to medium, and then for Visayan Sea, it's medium. So this really shows that by site there is quite a bit of difference. But when we combine them, we wanted to look at differences between groups for the whole sample. And so here is on the left a graph of scores for fishing households, and on the right is for non-fishing households. And in here, there's only one significant difference on the Calamayanes Islands group at the level 3. But other than that, there are no statistically significant differences between fishing and non-fishing households. And that is a good indication that this index is really getting information from the whole community, not just fishing households. In addition, I looked at differences between female scores and male scores, and there are a few differences here. The most prevalent ones, I would say, are within the Calamayanes Islands group. And there are a variety of reasons that could be the case, which I'll get into in a little bit. But I do think that there is an opportunity to expand this tool to include some more actions that could be directed a little bit more towards actions that women are more likely to take. So just a little summary of thinking about the differences. There's only one, as I said, between fishing and non-fishing households, there was only one difference. And overall, it looks more like a normal distribution among those households. So I think it's a pretty applicable tool in that way. And then between males and females, there were more differences at individual levels. And overall, at the highest level, the index score equaling 4, for all sites, there were significant differences. It could be that the Columbianus Islands group is a little bit different in terms of the sample or the context, and it should be looked at a little bit further, but also females could have less of an opportunity to engage in some of these activities used to assess the index. Oops. So at that, I will just thank collaborators. Come back.
Yeah, thank you, Dawn. I was thinking at this point that, yeah, maybe there might be clarificatory questions first, of just to make sure that everybody understood the past two presentations before we get to the next. I forgot to try to check to ensure that everything was clear, and then later on we'll get into the more discussion questions. But for now, just for clarification, were both presentations clear? Were there things that people wanted to clarify first of all? Okay.
Proceed na lang. Let's just proceed.
Yeah. Proceed na lang. Okay. If not, then we'll proceed with the third presentation. Fredo, thank you.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Fredo.
Yes, good afternoon, guys. So my presentation about the Fish Right Program Initiative on Gender Inclusive Approach to EAFM strengthens the depth and reach of ecological and socio-economic impacts. The Fish Right Program Philippine Experience, no? So the program started last 2018, and it will end by 2023. The Fish Right Program implemented in the Philippines, funded by USAID, started 2018, and intends to influence system change in the fisheries sector by improving resource users' compliance with agreed upon harvest control rules, resulting in a higher fish biomass in a critical marine biodiversity sites. In order to obtain its goal, Fish Right implements various initiatives to reduce marine biodiversity, such as overfishing, destructive illegal fishing, and degradation of marine ecosystem. This presentation will elaborate on how the program adjusted gender lens towards gender inclusive approach by highlighting women's role and contribution to reducing threats and key results to date. Fish Right applied various tools and approaches over past 4 years in a male-dominated sector, while women hold the key roles and contribute to the fisheries value chain. They remain invisible. Central to the gender integration tools and approaches in the Fish Right program was to make the invisible visible. The program envisioned on recognizing and valuing participation and contribution of women fishers by building women's capacity and providing space and opportunities to actively participate, lead, have control, and make decisions in development plans, policies, programs, and projects in marine coastal areas. Hence, at the conception and planning phases, gender perspective integrated in fish right endeavor to demonstrate the significant roles that women play in the fisheries sector, like what I said before, making the invisible visible, increase access, the tools to change their families' lives, builds businesses, build constituencies that demands a well-managed fisheries sector, provide women with the tools they need to become leaders and advocate for EAFM. Women are active in fisheries sector, however, their roles are not equal to men, and this is due to the socialization process, like the effects or the effects of religion, the norms and practices. Fish right recognize that men and women have different perspective, interests, needs, and priorities, which should be understood to successfully engage them in fisheries management, specifically that women and men tend to different work in the fisheries sector. Women tend to have less than men to formal decision-making authorities and less involved in the local decision-making structures. Women and men have different access to and control over fisheries resources. Women and men have different spheres of traditional knowledge and leadership. Women and men have different domestic responsibilities, the reproductive role, including the financial expenditures. This understanding and knowledge were tools used to adjust gender lens and develop evidence-based gender tools and approaches that address the gaps and issues of fishermen and women in fisheries sector to better manage and have control over their resources. Fish right gender inclusive approach. So here are the initiatives that the fish right program implemented to address the gender gaps in the fisheries sector. First, we conducted a gender analysis. So foremost was recognizing and addressing presence of gender gaps and targeting results that could empower women through gender mainstreaming, considering the different roles and elevate women and men into a position where they participate as equal in fisheries management. The gender analysis was conducted to understand the needs, the roles, the aspiration of women and men, including the factors that motivates men and women to take action. The gender role analysis was implemented in 3 marine key biodiversity areas in the Philippines: the Calamianes Island Group, CIG, Southern Negros Island, and the Visayan Sea. All these MKBAs are highly biodiverse with coral reefs and mangroves and seagrass beds that support the municipal and industrial fisheries. Approximately around 2 million persons live across the 3 sites. The results of the gender analysis guided various program interventions to ensure gender equality and women empowerment are integrated in the program. One of the gender analysis result is that an ecosystem approach of the fisheries management, EAFM, needs to be at scale encompassing the nearshore areas that women primarily exploit, which became the basis for establishing of WMA, or Women Managed Area. Tenurial system where women are visible and active participants. Designated areas with municipal water were established for women managed areas, WMA. Example, mangroves, seagrass, intertidal flats that exclusively manage and control women's use or have a co-management arrangement. The critical element of WMA includes women decision making about the purpose, the methods, and allocation of resource benefits. The outcome of this is a greater self-confidence and self-approval that women's reliance on their strength brought fruition to women's visibility of resource management. Fish Right program established as of now 9 women managed area, with a management plan and organizational structure and recognized by LGU, barangay or municipal level through a resolution. However, the 3 WMAs out of the 9 are managed of IP women. Women's confidence increased as they realize the importance of their voice and ability to decide for their WMA. In addition, Fish Right ensured that at least 30% representation of women in development programs, policies, and plans and fisheries projects by implementing monitoring and specific provision of the Philippines Magna Carta of Women. As such, women form a part of Municipal Fisheries Aquatic Resource Management Council, a recommendatory policy-making body on fisheries at the municipal level. Identify entry points for women empowerment. Financing and livelihood tools that are innovative and using information technology that promotes biodiversity conservation provided opportunities to men and women, at the same time improve household incomes that allow women economic and political leverage. Example of these were Fish Change, a buyer and a seller platform which was adopted during the pandemic, where accessing food and marketing of fish catch proved to be a challenge the community faced. The platform addressed issues of limited mobility as a result to a lockdown and somehow prevented COVID transmission. Community savings group were also established in efforts to have a community-based financial institution that will foster and promote savings as a platform for engaging the fishing community, as well as assisting them in improving their personal and household financial resiliency. Groups even located percentage for social funds for use in environmental and gender activities. Fish Right program facilitate the formation, as of now, of 15 community savings and credit association. Most of the women's testimonial about COMSCA are positive because it helps them a lot during their emergency needs, that they can easily borrow money with low interest rates. The women are also learn the value of saving and leading an organization like COMSCA. Formation of women networks and alliances. So, formation of women networks and alliances to provide a safe space to discuss women's concern, issues, and needs, and to some extent linked to available services. Fish Right consolidated and organized existing women's organization, like Women Managing Protected Areas, Women Fishers Organization, Rural Improvement Club in the coastal communities. The women's group then organized themselves into a gender and women network, both at the municipal and inter-LGU levels, making their fisheries issues and voices heard collectively and empowered to advocate for women's needs, concern, and interest in the fisheries sector. FishRight facilitates the formation of the CIG-wide Gender and Women's Network, an inter-LGU network that promotes women's agenda in fisheries. It is also a venue for women to enhance their innate skills and knowledge in leading, managing, and protecting their fisheries. So another initiative, development of assessment mainstreaming tool. The program developed tools like the Gender Mainstreaming Assessment Tool, or we call it GenMat. This is a tool that helps to assess the efficiency with gender is mainstreamed into coastal development activity, notably fisheries management over the course of the program cycle or in policy development monitoring to ensure gender equality. Gender is mainstream in the policies, programs, plans, and projects because of the FR partners use the gender mainstreaming tool. Gender Academy. To ensure that the program's gender mainstreaming initiative continue and sustain during the pandemic and beyond, the Gender Academy was created to provide participants with necessary knowledge, skills, and attitude to mainstream or integrate gender needs and interests in fisheries. It is also aims to improve the skills and expertise of local governments, non-government organizations, students, and female and male fisher leaders in fisheries management from a gender perspective. There are 3 online courses available through the Gender Academy: Introduction to Gender and Fisheries, Peer Educators on Sustainable Fisheries Leadership, Training and Introductory Course on EAFM and Gender. The women realized that because of the knowledge and skills they learned in the training, they became articulate in expressing their ideas and increased their self-confidence that they were able to lead. Towards building forward better, challenge social construct and grow women's confidence by engaging men who have stronger voice and women to have strong incentives to engage in EAFM, to work together to implement broader scale co-management arrangement and to demand good fisheries management practice. This gender adjustment will lead to timelier, more enduring, and more effectively diffuse EAFM implementation. Actually, this is the result of the gender analysis. So to concretize this, or to achieve this, there are some recommendations. First, include gender access and control profile exercise in EAFM and other fisheries management activities to highlight the importance of the resources that women control to the health and resource that men control. Improve financial literacy, including how women access and use loans. Maybe we can get away from the idea that merely providing loans will lead to empowerment. So women need a whole toolbox to fully take advantage of loans and use them as a springboard to empowerment. When we say empowerment, it's not only the economic empowerment, but also the political empowerment of women. Enhancement and expansion of existing women's fishers network. That's why we establish or facilitate the formation of the gender network. Implement leadership training of women and men together, but with special focus on women's leadership. And that's why also we form the Gender Academy. And I want to end my presentation with the testimony of a fisherman leader. The president of the Calamian MPA network and his name is Jojo Maso. He is grateful to the Fish Right program because he has a partner in ocean conservation and protection. And this is his wife, Imelda Maso, who happens to be the president of the CIG Gender and Women Network. Thank you. Andre, and that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Fredo. So thank you everyone for all your presentations. Maybe just to sort of recap a bit what have we've been through. No, so we've had a presentation about how illegal fishing is being understood better in the Philippines using a tool to drill down and understand it better together with the local government and local communities together so that they can make plans to address it better. And then we had Dawn sharing about the fisheries ecosystem, stewardship model, and trying to see which various variables might be having an influence and what are the sort of the variation in people who are having more sense of stewardship, voluntarily wanting to take care of the fisheries ecosystem. And now we've had some inputs from Fredo on the work trying to get people of all genders more involved in the work in fisheries management in the Philippines. Maybe just to, I'm not sure to what extent the participants can see all of us. And maybe we could, since there are not too many of us, maybe we could invite you guys to also be, to join us. I'm not sure if you can see all of us, but we also have here, we have the three presenters, myself on the IUU, Dawn on the stewardship model, and Fredo on gender. And we have also three panelists, reactors. We have Ali Ferretti Tawake, who is the lead in Fiji for the LMMA, or locally managed marine areas, right? Network there. And we have Joan Castro, who is the executive director of the Path Foundation Philippines Incorporated, which deals with conservation and health interface. And we have Dr. Ben Malayang here, who is with Silliman University, one of our, well, he's a thinker in all sorts of phases, I should say. So it's hard to describe him. Then we have Lauren Josephs, who is working, we know, on the various fisheries works, but particularly right now, I think, on the distant water fleets with University of Rhode Island. And we have from our convener here, assisting us, Madhu. And from our participants, we have here someone from our participant. I don't know if you wanted to, we'll maybe allow him to chat and maybe invite him if he wants to join us. But that being said, okay. So maybe, maybe you can first ask if Mr. Thong Put might want to maybe introduce himself a bit before we get into the, if he wants to, yeah.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I am Jay attending. Yeah, thank you very much. I have no special question for now. Yeah, okay. Thank you with the great presentation and sharing.
All right, thank you. Okay, maybe we'll first ask Ali Ferretti if what does he think of these presentations and whether these would be applicable to his context, perhaps. Thank you.
So, thank you so much for the presentation. Can I get some thumbs up if you can hear me properly? All right, thank you. I'm sitting at the airport, so please I'm apologizing in advance for the distraction and the noise behind me. So my my response or reaction would very much look at uh, how the tools can be applied to the specific context, and I'll respond to each of the three tools that was presented. And I must say, first, they are very, very well, and I congratulate the project for the impact and the results that have been shared. On the first one, on the IUU compliance, I think the tool in itself is very much needed for the Pacific. I would say for the Pacific and Fiji included, and something perhaps will be exploring too as part of our Fish USA program too that is starting. The prevalence, vulnerability, and context or response measure, there is a lot of overlap with the need, and it's a neat way of getting down to measurable indicators rather than what have been measured and focused on by many governments in the Pacific are very much qualitative. And I think this tool helps in looking at where are the problem areas, as you've indicated, where the intervention needs to be focused, and in terms of IUU solutions to address them. I mean personally, I think it's has a place and is very useful to be contextualized for the Pacific and in particular Fiji. The second one on Fiji, on environmental stewardship tool, I think I see the demographics data and the information is very critical. I mean, especially the context of the Pacific, we have women, men, and some of the cultural differences that also come with it. How can we anticipate some of those cultural, I would say, uniqueness that or the tradition that separates men and women, and in a way that that helps integrate the way that they would respond to problems and issues. I mean, I'm going across the three presentations. I think where you mentioned about the LGUs, we see very much delineations of LGUs or municipal waters. There's a lot of overlap in the Pacific, where those customary fishing grounds are already legally delineated. And I think it's a unit that can be a focus for some of these projects, and IUU and Environmental Stewardship Index assessment. The last one on the Fish Right program, the name catches the attention from the start. Fish Right, and it in some ways demands some level of accountability as well. And I think you can see some of the work that's already been conducted in the Pacific around gender, mainstreaming, whatever the variations, the mainstreaming, gender assessment.
Maybe, was it just me or did his internet seem to freeze, no? Okay, maybe he was warning us about this, that this internet might go out anytime. Okay, all right, thank you. So maybe in the interest of time, we'll try to move on and try to maybe hear some thoughts from Ben. What are your, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All three presentations are about tools to somehow change behavior in the management of fisheries, in how communities participate in the care of their fisheries assets and resources, and in the manner by which we are able to achieve gender equity in the conduct of the business and affairs of policy making, as well as programming in fisheries. Before I go into the how I see the three things coming together, let me somehow present to you some things I thought while listening to all three of you. In all of those three about tools to change behavior, I think two concepts are foundational. Two concepts are foundational, and I explain later for each one why. The first concept is what I just, for the sake of this presentation, I call existential education. To educate people in a way that will hit their pulse and their purse. Existential. Hit their pulse, heartbeats, and their purse, their pockets. That's existential education. Getting them to understand the realities that if they are not able to understand these realities, they will not know what would hit their pulse and their purse. Existential education, just for the sake of that. And then the second concept that I'd like to introduce into the discussion is the concept of again, for the purpose of our conversation, a culture of care, meaning to embed the morals and ethics of caring for resources in our daily behavior. To me, existential education, as I defined it, is a necessary precondition to create a culture of care. And these dynamics of existential education creating a culture of care are two presuppositions for how we might expect IFIT, environmental stewardship, and gender equity to be successfully adopted into the behavior of fisheries managers and others. Let me explain. With an existential education and creating a culture of care, it will then facilitate a widespread use of the prototypes of IFIT by collaborative applications among communities, LGUs, local governments, and national government agencies. We cannot expect this collaborative and enthusiastic use of this tool until and unless there is prior culturalization of the concept of care in their behavior. And once there's widespread use of that prototype, it can be expected that this prototype will be continuously sharpened and honed as both technical and socially acceptable tool. And once that happens, it will inevitably then facilitate widespread adoption of the tool as a routine in the management behaviors and cultures of management of our fisheries. That's how I see it in the case of this. We can talk about the nature of the tool. We can talk about the effectiveness and anticipated efficiency of the tool. But until and unless it is adopted as a culture of doing management of fisheries, we cannot expect it to make a lot of difference. In the case of stewardship, stewardship, community stewardship, I believe what Dawn was trying to say is that we need to somehow intensify and make a widespread practice of the behavior of stewardship among communities. That is the end result that we want to achieve, a vision of communities caring for their resources. But again, that is not going to happen until and unless there is first a culture of care among them to really make a move and a change in their behavior towards their resources. And that culture of care cannot be expected to happen until and unless they are able to appreciate the necessity of that. Because if they don't do so, it will hit their pulse and their purse. That's the kind of education that creates this culture of care that then facilitates the adoption and then behavior of environmental stewardship. Environmental stewardship is not a concept, it must be a behavior in order to really make a difference. And finally, in the case of gender, to make gender equity a big difference in how our fisheries world, in both policy making as well as programming, as well as practice of fisheries, gender equity is a powerful determinant of success. And that is what Fredo was trying to tell us. But then again, I have a feeling that such thing cannot happen until and unless there is a collective sense of caring as part of the intrinsic moral and ethical infrastructure of the community. And this cannot also happen until the community is quote unquote educated in such an existential way that they will see that such a care must be made a part and parcel of their moral and ethical infrastructure. When this happens, you could bet will make an ocean of a difference in how we are going to manage and care for, protect, and sustain our fisheries. Thank you.
Thank you, Doc Ben. Yeah, I just wanted to mention, not just as additional information, maybe because I'm familiar with Dawn's work and some of Fredo's work. These are also sort of the tips of the iceberg here that they shared. There's a lot more complexity, but I think they were just sharing just some of the top level stories, and so there's more tools and details in the tools that they use to get at where they are right now. Just to share, no? Yeah, thank you. But yes, I appreciate what Ben was saying. It really has to. What they were saying here, it really has to hit your stomach and your life before, so that you will care about these things, no? So yes, may we? Yeah, Ali Ferretti is back. He was sharing his thoughts on the gender presentation. Perhaps now he could complete that before we move on. Yeah, before we move to the next panelist.
Yes, thank you, Andre. Very, very quickly, what I was trying to conclude with the approach that we are using, regularizing in the Pacific. I'm glad I had the opportunity to, after Ben, because it picks up on some of the key points, the principles that Ben has mentioned. We found a place to have visioning for the community. It's a very poignant moment for communities to be able to come together and see the future together. Look at 10 years, what is their common or shared vision, and they share, they draw, they tell stories around it, and then, and these are sectors of the community. They have the women, the men, fishers, the elders, the chiefs. When they have a common vision, a shared vision, then that is the kind of consensus that also demands, and when they work backwards, demands some level of obligation on their part, and they are able to commit and commit to changing the way they do things. And what I was saying in that having a common or shared vision for the community, that trickles down when the women groups meet, they know the big picture, and then they're able to expand and express themselves, knowing that they're also contributing to the big vision of the community, and helps in the cohesiveness, the social, building the social cohesion of the community, that helps in the complying to the rules, as well as even among the communities, as well as outside. That's one of the, after decades of learning how to do things, we found that that's one of them, the exercise, participatory visioning exercise that helps take a stake of where they want to go, the kind of future that they desire, and then they work backwards and redefine how they do things to change their behavior, and express it in the plans that they will agree to. So then, I'm picking up more time. I just wanted to end there and say that the three presentations are very, very well received and applicable for those tools to the Pacific, and it adds value to the work that's already been done.
Thank you. So now we'll hear from Joanne on her thoughts.
Thank you, Andre. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. And thank you very much, presenters, for sharing all those examples and experiences on the community-based ecosystems approaches to fisheries management, which I believe are applicable not only to the Fish Right Program, but also in countries with similar issues and contexts in the Asia and the Pacific. At this conference, I was actually able to listen to various initiatives in the region, which includes presentations from Sri Lanka, Japan, Indonesia, and being familiar with fish right experience. I thought initially that I will respond on the gender inclusive approaches, but I think it will cut across different tools that have been discussed, like IFEED and the environmental stewardship model. What seemed ubiquitous across the countries and cultures is the role of women in fisheries sector, but they are all stereotyped. Mm-hmm. There are also various and diverse activities for and with women that contributed to better social and ecological services. However, gender gaps remain. IUUF is also an issue that's prevalent, that was discussed in the various sharings that were done by various countries. But what was striking to me in this conference, which I'd like to draw towards talking about the discussions in our session, is that despite what has been done and what's going on to mainstream gender, to address IUUF, a question that was raised by one of the participants at this conference, and which I would quote when she said, if we have done so much, why are women in fisheries still invisible? And then one also said this morning, we keep on discussing researches, but what have we done to move from discussions to actions that will be felt by the community-based fishers, that's relevant to them and will benefit them? So that was the challenge that was posed. Fair comments and questions, which I reflected upon while listening to the tools and approaches that were presented earlier. And I believe they should be considered because these tools have been used very well. Well, at least starting for some tools, but they show a lot of promise in terms of use in various programs that will ensure that the fishers will be fisheries management will be sustainable and will have will attain equity of the resource users. Some of the things that I thought may be critical is the need for collective and sustained efforts rather than isolated activities to create an impact using evidence, ground truthing, and appropriate technology. And I think that rounds up what the IFIT tool was talking about. Understanding what the needs are, responding and using technology based on all of these things could actually provide a rational response that would be used by the communities themselves. The Fish Right program also applied gender inclusive approach to address gender differences that was relevant also even during the pandemic, ranging from gender analysis, tenurial arrangements, adaptive capacity building, and others. These were initially site-specific, but what was transformed to creating a constituency of women fishers and leaders from among women's groups that somehow led to closing the gender power gap in a male-dominated sector and actually has collectively improved management of an estimated more than 960 hectares of mangroves in the Calamianes Island Group. At first, I thought the number was big, but when I was looking at the ratio against the total hectares protected by the men, it was only 4%. But I thought that we started from zero. And so 4% is still very huge. Secondly, applying integrated population, environment, and development solutions that recognize the connections between people, their health, environment, and other development aspects to attain human and ecosystems well-being. There's evidence to show that holistic and integrated approaches create synergies that empower women and girls, improve resilience, and the recovery from human environmental shocks. Benefits like economic growth and improved environmental indicators were also noted in integrated approaches. Listening to some of the presentations, particularly in Japan, they mentioned about a lot of indigenous knowledge. And I thought that maybe exchanging and sharing diverse knowledge, skills, value, specific adapted responses of women fishers from various countries on how they establish socio-ecological system in the fishing sector should be shared from among the small-scale fishers, both men and women. And lastly, I believe that towards a transformative, sustainable, inclusive, equitable future, which are all big words, moving towards a future, quality partnership between men and women, and a multi-sectoral approach could be solutions to ensure that the norm, culture, and structures are based on equity and equality. And I think that those would also complement the other foundational information that Doc Ben and the other panelists mentioned today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanne. Yes. Yeah, I was actually also just thinking when you spoke and were saying your words that, yeah, a lot of the illegal activities is probably still happening because there's still not much stakeholder participation and ownership in the management. No? Unlike some of the Japanese speakers I've heard also speaking in some of the sessions here, they seem to have much stronger ownership of their fisheries here, no?
Andre?
Yes?
There seems to be some phenomenon that we need to also flag here. And that is the active claim by government that the public domain, including waters, are government's domain, tend to alienate our local communities from thinking that it is theirs. And therefore, with that kind of attitude, it's almost always, you hear it often when you talk to fishers. They will say that there's a lot of illegal activities around us here because we don't know what BFAR or government is doing. They seem to be failing. And yet they are not saying we seem to fail in protecting what is ours. So this concept of active and aggressive government governance of fisheries areas to the extent of being dominating in the management of access to these fisheries areas is creating a divide and a reduction of sense of stewardship among communities, that it is their fishing grounds. So in South Negros, I did not anymore try to use the word municipal fishing areas. I say your fishing grounds, where you fish. And where they fish, by the way, need not be within their own municipal fishing areas. And so the government delineation and demarcations of municipal fishing grounds, being municipality A, municipality B, is also creating a dysfunction with the ecosystem's approach to fisheries management. So I think this needs to be flagged and discussed as part of a possible hindrance to what Dawn was talking about, creating a culture of stewardship. Thank you.
Yeah. I also heard a story from some of the Japanese people studying these things that they were saying at one point in their history, so it's very strong sort of ownership and rights holding by the like fisheries associations. And then when the government tried to take more power, they sort of, I don't know, revolted or something. So within 1 year, the government handed it back. So that's what I heard happened in here. Yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, there are groups that are otherwise located in the uplands, and they practice a culture of spatial temporal mobility with respect to food. Among the Batak in Palawan, and in Hokkaido in Japan, their women often go down to shorelines to fish with hook and line. It's not the men, it's the women, in order to supplement protein. This is a preferred source of protein, fisheries among them, but only when their forest products and food sources in the forest start to change across seasons. And yet when they go there, when the coastal areas, it's managed by fishers associations and government that do not seem to include what are called seasonal users and seasonal fishers, like indigenous people from the upland. Again, this has not been, in Hokkaido, among the Ainu, this has been studied as early as if I remember it right, 1974, 75, by a person named Maruyama. And but it became a classic, actually. But the coastal communities of Hokkaido tend to have a conflict with them because they think that these people the Ainu are poaching on their traditional fishing grounds. So a lot of these dynamics are occurring that must be taken into account, I guess, Dawn, with respect to concept of stewardship. Who would be the stewards? Would it be the permanent settlers of the coastal areas? What about those that are seasonally dependent on coastal areas? Okay. Thank you.
So we're nearly 3 minutes left. I think it was quite enriching. But so just to recap, we had these presentations on illegal fishing, drilling down tools, basically understanding it better. The other one is trying to understand the propensity for stewardship for fisheries ecosystems. The other one is models on how to be more gender inclusive in fisheries management. And then we had 3 panelists share on their thoughts on these. I'd like now to open if there are any final other thoughts or questions or clarifications before we close. Okay. So hearing none, then thank you very much, everybody, for your participation. And and we'll see you around, some of us here. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.